never give in. Never, never, never.
You may remember at the end of the last series, listener Sallie Mogford alerted us to hush-hush plans that were in place had Hitler breached Britain's defences.
My grandfather, Les Bully, was a member of the British Resistance Organisation. The patrol were based in a remote hidden underground bunker near Langstone in Gwent. Their mission, had the Germans invaded, was to sabotage enemy supplies and blow up roads and bridges. Their life expectancy was only about 10 days.
So who were this clandestine force? I went to Wentwood Forest in Monmouthshire to meet Sallie to hear about this particular band of invisible soldiers.
This really is warfare terrain, isn't it? Now, the auxiliary units, what were they?
They were part of the British Resistance Organisation, and they were formed on the 2nd of July 1940 by Winston Churchill. They were a very, very secret underground organisation made up of cells of 7 men, and the members of the auxiliary units were very, very highly trained saboteurs, guerrillas.
Now, you have a personal connection with this story because your grandfather Leslie and great-uncle Charles spent the war as a member of an auxiliary unit.
Yes, they did, yes, both of them. Brothers in arms.
And where exactly are we going now, Sallie?
This is Coed Common.
Yes.
It's an ancient woodland. They masqueraded as being members of the Home Guard. My grandmother died in the mid-1980s and she never knew what her husband had been doing during the war.
What was their specific mission if the enemy landed?
They were to remain behind enemy lines. The code word for an invasion was "the balloon's gone up." So as soon as they received that code word, they would leave their homes, probably for the last time, come up here to their operational base and go into active operations. And if you can see the main operational base from here.
Ah, right, we're just about...
Obviously, that would have been completely invisible.
We're about 20 yards away.
Yes.
We're going down into this dell.
The main chamber, where they would have slept, is about 4 metres by 3 metres, so it's quite big, and you can stand up in it quite easily.
Yeah, thank you. Here I am, imagining myself to be a member of the auxiliary unit.
Right. I'm shining a torch into the second chamber, and it was made of corrugated iron.
Corrugated iron. It was actually known as an elephant shelter because the iron was so thick.
Actually peering into the Second World War, but an unknown part. What it is now is just a lot of leaves and a dirt floor.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Richard.
My name's Richard Frame, and a few years ago I was first made aware of the auxiliary units.
You have there, Richard, the auxiliary unit's operation manual. But it says, the Countryman's Diary, 1939, Highworth's fertilisers, and you open up inside, and there you have, I won't go into detail, but basically it's how to make a bomb, what to do with gelignite, how to make a fire pot, magnesium incendiary. This is all the secret stuff of war.
Nobody would pick that off a bookshelf thinking that there was going to be what there is inside the covers. They just think it was some boring farming catalogue.
Except there is a slight pun on, I think. You will find the name Highworth wherever quick results are required.
Very subtle.
They were given a false identity as being Home Guard Battalion 202, Area 19, Group 3. I actually have a shoulder flash with 202.
Oh, can I see
Yes,
it?
yeah. It's stuck on the end of this detonator.
Goodness. A spring-pull detonator.
It's actually been fired. It's quite safe.
That's a relief.
They were very, very highly trained. They had the sticky bombs, which the regular army just refused to use because they were so dangerous. They also had grenades with a 4-second fuse, whereas the regulars had grenades with a 7-second fuse. So the 4-second fuse meant that they could throw it and it would never come back.
Now, where to next?
The special duty section bunker is about another 5-minute walk.
Give you a clue, we're nearly there now.
Right. It's away to our right, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually stood right by it.
That's it.
Yes.
We are looking at an indentation in the earth. Richard's just clearing the way.
This is
Thanks, Richard. Thank you very much.
This is actually one of the best preserved bunkers left in the country.
What I'm doing now is I'm actually entering. I'm going down.
We're standing here in front of a blast wall, so if a hand grenade was thrown down these steps, it would explode here, not actually injure the people inside the room in here.
Yeah.
It's a very narrow, very low entrance now. Now we're inside,
So we can
the
stand
radio
up.
transmitting room, and you can see in front of you 2 large clay pipes coming in.
Yes.
And it was an aerial would be coming down one of those pipes.
Yeah.
It would then gone up into a tree,
Right.
so which would have transmitted the signal.
Sally, what do you think about these invisible soldiers now and the fact that there's been no public recognition of their service?
I think it's a real shame because they were extremely brave men. They would have given everything to protect our country. And a lot of people thought that they just were playing at being in the Home Guards, or they didn't contribute to the war at all because they were in reserved occupations.
With thanks to Sallie Mogford and Richard Frame. To give a nationwide perspective on Britain's hidden force, I'm joined from our Suffolk studio by John Warwicker, author of Churchill's Underground Army, A History of the Auxiliary Units in World War II. John, listening to Sally's family story, was Wales a particularly strategic area?
It's a very interesting question. It was a particular strategic area at one stage. During the outset of World War II, it was not impossible to envisage an invasion of the Irish Republic, and the south area of Wales was regarded as pretty strategically important because of the ports and because of the nearby facilities of one kind or another, and suitable beaches on which it might have been possible to land.
Where else in the country were the units laying in wait?
The principal vulnerable counties were Kent and Sussex, and East Anglia was regarded as the second most important. But in due course, auxiliary units were posted within about 20 miles of the coast usually, from Cornwall to the southwest up to North Foreland in Kent, and then north from that right to up to and including the east coast of Scotland.
Now, the men in the units, certainly in Wales, were mainly in reserved occupations, some working in munitions factories. But what was the process of recruitment? How did it work?
The process of recruitment was entirely done on an old boy network. A number of men were selected to become patrol leaders. They were local people, usually with a great deal of resourcefulness, patriotism. Local knowledge was absolutely essential. And once they had been selected, he would then be invited to find 5 or 6 colleagues with whom he could live in confined spaces underground under very risky circumstances in what, of course, undoubtedly was a do-or-die mission.
John, we've also heard from a listener in Scotland who had relatives in the resistance. This is Colin Topping.
Landowners in Scotland, people like Sir Torquil Monroe, etc., allowed the auxiliary units to train on their estates. And Sir Torquil Monroe, I believe, was a friend of David Stirling's father, David Stirling being the founder of the SAS. And I have anecdotal reports that David Stirling got the idea of the SAS, small patrols going in, carrying out sabotage and getting out, and also gathering intelligence. So that I think there is a link between the early auxiliary units and the early formation of the Special Air Service as well.
John, anything in this that links between the units and the SAS?
I think there's none at all. David Stirling was very dissatisfied indeed with the role of irregular forces as he found them. However, I cannot veto the idea that he had contact with the auxiliary units in Scotland, but we have to bear in mind that in the early days of the auxiliary units, their existence was not known to anybody. It was not even known to local army commanders. It was not even known to General Montgomery when he was officer in charge of the defence forces in Kent after Dunkirk.
And John, just in closing, the actions of the Chindits, General Wingate's saboteur force against the Japanese in Burma, are well documented. But why don't we know more about the similarly organised auxiliary units?
My impression, after many years of research, is that there is something to hide about the auxiliary units to this day. It could have been, of course, because of guilt, because the authorities put these men into a position where they would legally have been executed by the enemy as civilian saboteurs behind the lines, and they would have had no rights as POWs. Or it could have been, for example, and I'm only speculating, that some of the men were used after the war for other purposes. But I hasten to add, I'm speculating, and the reason I'm speculating is because the papers, if there are any, are simply not on record.
John Warwicker from the Museum of British Resistance Organisation, thank you.